Welcome to the For the Church podcast, another great gospel-centered resource from Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. My name is Jared Wilson. I'm an associate professor of pastoral ministry and author in residence at Midwestern Seminary. And I'm here as always with my friend and my colleague and my co-host, Dr. Ronnie Kurtz, assistant professor of systematic theology, who believes that comedy died in the 90s.
It did.
It did die in the 90s.
I mean, what's the funniest movie you have seen that was made post-2005?
I probably can't think of anything.
Exactly.
But I was telling you before, we just saw the, and this is a family-friendly movie. That's the thing.
This is not a film club episode.
A lot of comedies that come out are not family-friendly,
right.
so it gets harder to see things because they keep pushing the envelope and getting more crass. But we went and saw The Breadwinner, which is Nate Bargatze. Yeah. If you're not familiar with Nate Bargatze, he's a comedian. He's not a Christian comedian, but he's a clean likely comedian. A Christian who is a comedian.
That's right.
He doesn't do Christian comedy, but it's clean comedy.
Yeah.
And if you're like me in the past, that usually means it's not funny.
But Nate's funny. Yeah.
But he is funny.
Yeah, he's actually funny.
Yeah, he's actually funny. Not that I prefer unclean. I hope that didn't.
Loud and clear, bud.
The guys that market themselves that way, I just don't think that they're very funny.
No,
it's not like I want my comedy dirty. I like Jerry Seinfeld and stuff like that. He's a clean guy.
Yeah,
but he doesn't. He's not known as a clean comedian.
That's
like
right.
Some of these guys are. But Nate is like that and is very self-consciously markets himself that way, and is very, very funny.
Okay,
and I've been following Nate even before he was doing arenas and all that.
Yeah,
I remember
Netflix stuff.
A friend of mine who lives out in California who. Has done some comedy stuff on his own.
Yeah.
We were doing an event together, a student ministry event, and he was telling me about this guy, Nate Bargatze, who had just been on, it wasn't Last Comic Standing, but some kind of competition thing that was televised. And he was like, you gotta listen to the guy because I think he's a Christian, but he's really funny. And so I found him on YouTube. Before he lost all the weight and everything.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's very different.
So this is
looking.
before, and then I found, and then his podcast. So I started listening to his podcast,
Nate.
And
What's
then all of a sudden
Nate?
He starts blowing up.
Yeah.
He's like a huge celebrity now.
You're a Nate Bargatze hipster.
Yeah,
Wow.
And now, I'm kind of now that he's cool, I'm not into him anymore.
That's
anyway, we went and saw his movie, The Breadwinner.
Yeah,
and it was pretty good.
Hey, I can't imagine him as acting.
No, he's not a great actor.
Yeah.
But he's better than I thought he might.
Except his SNL skit about the finding of America. That was so funny.
It is, and that went viral, and I think a lot of people kind of became aware of him because of the
that
SNL
skit.
stuff.
Yeah, I mean that was hilarious.
Yeah, and he had SNL cast member Colin Jost is in the movie. SNL alum Will Forte is in the movie. He's got some good supporting. Cast members. It's not a great film. It's not an art.
We're not going to do
We're not doing a film club entry on it. But Becky and I laughed through the whole thing.
All right, I'll go see it.
My bar was low, but
you convinced me.
It surpassed. It was funny. You can probably wait till it's on.
All right.
It kind of bombed.
So what you're telling me is comedy's still alive.
I think comedy is barely breathing, but it's still alive.
It's on life support.
Like
but
the
it's
heart
here.
of rock and roll. It's barely breathing. Sorry, that reference predates you.
Yeah, that's
probably.
all right. Sometimes you got a Gen X, man. I get it.
I know. Yeah. Let's move to the mailbag because that's what kind of episode this is.
Your transitions are their last
I'm
two
off today.
little struggling.
Yeah, I think I might need to hang it up.
Nah.
I think I might need to retire the transitions.
You just need your Tom Brady to the Buccaneers era. You'll come back and win another Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's poor coaching. Yeah. I need to get out from under Belichick's shadow.
Yeah, that's it.
And get under the shadow of the mailbag. Got some great questions. In fact, most of these come from the previous appeal for questions.
Wow.
And
Listeners,
we just had so many that I had to divide them up. So thanks for your patience, those of you who've been waiting, but these are kind of old questions that we just haven't gotten to. So it's a good surplus.
Yeah, that's amazing.
In my bag. This comes from Nathan via Facebook. Nathan says, how do you encourage and equip men in your church to lead family worship in their homes? I get the sense that most know they should be doing it, but they either don't feel equipped or don't make time for it. How do you encourage and equip men in your church to lead family worship in their homes?
Yeah. I think the first thing I would say is I don't think men need another guilt trip.
Okay.
I think a lot of dads they're doing a lot. and have a lot of. I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old right now. It's like we're hanging on, man. Like get off my back. I think men don't need another guilt trip. Dads don't need another guilt trip. I think maybe dads need an encouragement to do 2 things: do something and be consistent.
Yeah,
do something and be consistent. It doesn't have to be like. I'm not asking you to be a seminary professor.
I think trying to take the pressure off.
That's exactly right.
The pressure off.
I'm not asking you to be a seminary professor. I'm asking you to be a dad with an open Bible every once in a while.
Yeah.
So like, let me give you an example for us at the Kurtz household. What family worship does not look like is like, all right, everyone gather around. I'm going to grab an acoustic guitar and we're going to do a mini church. Like we just don't do that. You know? Now I will say my family does uniquely like music, and so I don't think they would like revolt if I tried something like that. So I think you got to know your family. But like something that has worked for us is doing built-in intentional rhythms at night. So a small example, it's not overly brilliant, is my daughter and I are very consistent in praying through our church's directory at night.
All right.
And so we have a system where like every day is a certain page, and I let my daughter pick 2 brothers or sisters from the church directory, and we pray for those brothers and sisters by name. We often will send them a message, and just like sometimes it's Finley, my daughter, doing like I'll do a video, and if she knows them, like, hey, Mr. Mark, we're praying for you, and like it means so much to those brothers and sisters who get those messages, or at least they act like it does.
Yeah, you think they do.
Yeah, that's right. It's so sweet. Stop it. It's 10 o'clock at night. No, just kidding. And so it allows me, typically when we pray for certain things in those brothers or sisters' lives, it allows me to like disciple my daughter on like wisdom and those kinds of things. And so we always will, pray some scripture for them. And it's just like a intentional rhythm that's not overly brilliant, but it's consistent.
Yeah.
And so it's something.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of equipping, I think just giving the simple instruction to say, you don't need to bite off more than you can chew. You don't need to try to recreate like a little worship service or something like that. You don't even have to, think like original material of when we preach a sermon, some kind of even devotion. Because I think a lot of dads, sometimes they just feel like I don't have the capacity to do that, or I don't know, how to do that. But, if you give them good resources where, we used for a long time a family devotion book.
Yes,
where,
that's right.
You're reading a passage of scripture, and then I would just read the thing that's pre-written there for us. And it usually included a couple little questions, not difficult questions, but questions when my girls were little that they could answer, or think about. But even if that's too much, right, just to read some scripture, to ask some questions, basic Bible study type questions, right? Like, what do you think this means? Or, why do you think they said that? Or, how, what's some way that we can apply this in school or something like that? You can keep it short and simple. I think consistency is the key in a time of prayer. I also think some folks think it's a waste of time if their kids aren't totally paying attention all the time, or they're squirmy or whatever. And that's just going to happen. You're going to have little kids who are
often you're teaching it a habit.
Yeah, that's right. It's the repetition of it and the
Yeah.
rhythm of it. You're establishing that value.
Yeah.
You don't need to have them sit in little rows and with their hands quietly
That's
folded.
right.
And it's nice if that does happen.
Yeah.
But,
Let's start with our call to worship.
I think demystifying the thing.
That's exactly right.
Is
a little
key.
resource
Yeah.
shout out. Chris and I mean, we're in the stage of parenting where we have read every children's Bible storybook out there like 6 times.
Yeah.
And we have legitimately made it through all of them. And one that we have not heard people talk about very much that we liked a lot that could be really utilized for family worship is the Lithos Kids Kingdom of God Storybook Bible.
Okay.
Lithos Kids.
Okay.
It's a publisher. It follows 4 themes. So it's God's presence, God's people, God's promises, and God's plan, I think.
Okay.
And or maybe place. But it follows those 4 biblical themes throughout each story, and it gives like some handrails to hold on to. So my daughter, who was 5, she started like picking up on those 4 even before the book showed where those were happening. She's like, God's people,
Yeah.
And that was helpful to like kick up some questions in her mind.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. This comes from Josh via Facebook. He says, what is a helpful and thoughtful discipleship pathway to help someone go from a new believer to growing Christian to aspiring elder or deacon?
All right. Let's take them all the way.
The life cycle of
Yeah.
Well,
first I would say
from beginner to office holder.
Yeah. I would want to start this question by start this answer by saying not everyone's going to go there.
Yeah, it's not the
That's
the
not everyone's
optimum
goal.
pathway for everyone.
The goal is love of Christ and
Spiritual maturity.
That's right, spiritual maturity. Seeing that the gospel impacts every facet of life. Now, that being said, I remember it was a while ago, and I don't know if he's published this anywhere, but I remember J.T. English, who's a dear friend to probably both of us, but he talked about discipleship
I don't
as
like
this.
JT.
Yeah, that checks out. Yeah, you're right.
Not to me.
JT's the man. I love that guy. But I remember him. It was a passing comment he made, but it stuck with me. We were meeting with some churches in St. Louis, and their church was there. Our church was from Kansas City, was there, and we were just talking about church curriculum in general, and like all these different churches were there. And he talked about discipleship as like an upside down triangle, where the bottom, or like the longest side of the triangle, is new converts, and the tip is pastors. And he was making the comparison that our church at the time, Emmaus, we were really focusing with our pastoral residency kind of on the last 10% of the upside down triangle. And their church with his institute was really focusing on the first 10%. Mm-hmm. And we were just trying to help each other. Like, how do you think about the last 10%? How do we think about the first 10%? And even just that paradigm of like thinking of it as like this funnel kind of began helping me think through, what do I have for each level of the church? And I think there's a ton of great, I mean, even JT himself, his Deep Discipleship book, I would highly recommend it. And you can do it in layers. So,
yeah, I think less in terms of pathway, like there's some kind of pipeline.
Yeah.
You pop a guy into the end, and at on one end, and the other end he pops out pastor or a deacon. And I think more in terms of an ecosystem, where the pattern that we have, and it doesn't mean that you can't have, like I lead a residency that's, intentionally for training guys who want to be pastors. Yes. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't mean you can't have the aspects of things like that. A new believers study, group or something like that. But I just think the multi-generational, aspect of the church is that we're all together at different stages of maturity, but we're pursuing the same thing, and we're helping each other and sharpening each other. And so I don't know that there is such a thing as here's the
pathway.
Here's the path.
Yeah.
To start from you're a new convert to now you're going to be qualified to be a pastor. I think it's the life of a church that sort of produces that for different and different people are forged and formed in different ways. Mm-hmm. That there's not a one size fits all kind of cookie cutter.
You don't give your church
there's no
members
sausage
like
machine
colored belts like karate, like
blue
belt. Yeah.
And there's also, some churches do have like this is the elder development program, and so if you're a man in the church, you join that thing, and the idea is at the end you're qualified to be an elder, and just life doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. There's spiritual formation, there's character, there's things that come about that aren't just from reading books, but through your life, through the suffering, through different family situations and life experiences that you can't put in a lab and poke and prod and get a guy to be spiritually qualified, biblically qualified to be an elder. There's almost like pressures or something that's forming from on different fronts that you can't recreate. So I just think, Josh, that it's fine to have, programs. This is what it means to be an elder, or like this is, guys who will be elders have to go through this. I would shy away from you go through this and you're qualified to be an elder.
No, absolutely. Right.
I mean, we don't even say in our residency that like coming out the other end of it, you're going to be ordained or something like that. Yeah. Like we just, because we don't know. Sometimes the thing exposes character issues and things that would actually preclude that because of the design of it. So I don't know if our answer was
that's great.
Helpful,
I think that's great.
Okay, you thought it was helpful. So
was it Josh? He loved that answer.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. This comes from Will via email. Will says, I am actively pursuing a career in licensed professional counseling, primarily Christian counseling, and wish to be active in the ministry simultaneously. I'm also minoring in Christian ministry, if that adds any significance. Because of the educational requirements, a Bachelor of Science and a master's degree, I will be unable to attend seminary for about 6 years. What is y'all's opinion about youth discipleship ministers, pastors with no seminary behind them? Do you have any advice for me as I pursue this path?
All right. What's his brother's name? Will, he said?
This is Will.
All right, Will. Good job. I think this is awesome. I think a desire for eldership while having a normal vocation, as it were, outside of the church is a great thing, something we need more of, in fact. So, I mean, let me give you an example. At our church, I am currently at Emmaus Church. Well, currently, I hope to be there for a while. So, I'm at Emmaus Church.
For the time being.
Yeah, for the time. If they play their cards right.
Until I receive a better offer.
The free agency opens up soon. So, no, I'm at Emmaus Church. We have 6 elders, and only one of them is vocationally paid by the church. The other 5 have jobs outside of the church. Now, we are in a unique place given our proximity to the seminary where all of them have some kind of formal theological training, but that is not a mandate. It's not a biblical. It's not. You're not going to read that in 1 Timothy. I would say you need to read 1 Timothy and Titus. Make sure you qualify by virtue of the biblical qualifications. I would say seminary is not necessary, though it is extremely helpful. But you could definitely pursue eldership, ministry, vocational or non-vocational, without a seminary degree. I love that this brother Will wants to eventually get it. One thing I would say, if for non-seminary or non-degree holding pastors, is just you're still a pastor. So whatever it entails to be a pastor, which sometimes that's going to be a lot of biblical work. Sometimes it's going to be a lot of theological work. Sometimes it's going to be a lot of emotional work. So still do those things. Don't shy away from the kinds of things seminary would train you for. But I think this brother's fine. Yeah.
My opinion on seminary training for youth pastor or discipleship pastor is it can be helpful, but it's not necessary.
Yeah.
And especially if you're being trained concurrently with it. It's not like he's kicking the can of education down the road. He's just saying by the time I can get to the seminary portion of it, maybe a few years. I did 20-some years of pastoral ministry without a seminary degree. Yeah. So it would be kind of hypocritical for me to say, even as a seminary professor,
that's voided.
You got to have seminary before you do it. I wouldn't worry too much about that. Will, it sounds like you got a good head on your shoulders and you're not delaying it, training. I wish that I had done it, or I wish that I was able to, have done it. It wasn't from any kind of, despising of seminary education or anything like that, that I didn't do it. But it's certainly not. It's not necessary. And so, advice for you as you pursue this path, just pursue the things of the Lord. Don't let the lack of seminary, like formal training, prevent you from being a good student and reading a lot. That's one thing that I did do was I read a lot, and to the extent that I could, paid attention to guys who were seminary trained and seminary professors who produced material that was publicly accessible, either books or lectures online and those sorts of things. So avail yourself of those things, even if it's not a formal plan. This comes from Logan via Facebook. He says, how do you define calling when it comes to being called to ministry? What is the balance between subjective sensing and objective external affirmation? How does someone discern a release from their call? And how can this be misused and or misunderstood?
I like this question a lot, actually.
Yeah, it could be its own episode, honestly.
More it really could be.
Angles you take on it.
Do you want to make it one, or you want to answer it?
No. I mean, just briefly, then maybe we can sort of flesh out some things later.
Yeah, I'll say this. When I am around, I think I even have an article with either Gospel Coalition or For the Church on 2 errors that I see brothers make when they articulate a call to ministry.
Yeah.
And the 2 errors that I often see are, the first one I saw a lot at Cedarville University, actually.
Okay.
In our chapel, because we were a university that had, all kinds of majors, speakers would often try to build some street cred with the audience and say things like, I cannot believe I'm a pastor. When I was in your shoes, when I was in your seat, if you would have told me like, hey, one day you're going to be on stage preaching, I would have been like, you're crazy, And there's this the Lord had to drag me kicking and screaming into the ministry. I never thought I would be here. I always want to kind of raise my hand and be like, then you're not qualified.
That's right.
I know that sounds terrible, but the first qualification of elder is that you desire the office.
That's right.
And so the first error I see is men who are they almost are so humble, or even a faux humble, of like, I could see myself doing ministry, but I don't know, I could probably do something else. And
people who use like Jonah as their I'm like, Jonah was disobedient.
Yeah, that was not good. The Lord used some pretty serious measures.
That's right. Yeah.
So like that's the first error, is like the Lord had to bring me kicking and screaming. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Desire the ministry. That's okay. The second is the opposite, where it's like, I know the Lord has called me and no one will stop me.
Yes, yeah.
It's like, no, actually, they will. You
right.
might feel a sense of calling, but the church will decide if you're called,
Yeah.
And so I even see that in this brother's question, like, how do you balance the subjective internal call versus the objective church's affirmation? You do it by keeping those two things true. Is there a subjective call where you desire the office and you meet the biblical qualifications? You're actually gifted enough to do this, able to teach is in there. And then the church says, you express it to the elders and you say, I think I'm called to ministry.
Yeah.
Would you watch my life and put me through whatever process you need to see and confirm this in my life? And then eventually the church will say, yes, we believe you're called.
Yeah. In gospel-driven ministry, I talk about the internal call, the external call, which is basically what you just outlined. Internal call is that internal desire, the inclination towards it. He who aspires to this ministry desires a noble task, right? So there's something inside of you that is drawn towards that, and that is subjective. But then there's the external call, which is you've got those in your life, your church in particular, other pastors or leaders in your church or the congregation saying, we affirm this in you. We encourage you to pursue that. We'll invest in you perhaps. And when you're lacking one of those, right? So you've got the internal call without the external. Sometimes there's guys in churches where their church they're not even thinking that way.
Yeah.
I would have said at one time, I believe the Lord had called me into ministry, and I was in a church that was not an ideal environment to be invested or mentored that way. And in fact, it almost drove me out of that idea and was like, I don't know if this is for me, because the church there was not a sense of that external call, and it was very confusing to me. And it wasn't until a former youth pastor of mine said, hey, come serve our student ministry and be a part of our church plant. And I was like, okay. And he started investing in me and started affirming that. So I think one problem that sometimes we see over here is guys who they're theologically minded, or they just they like to talk, or they like to lead, what have you, and it's all that it's all internal and not a whole lot of external affirmation. But sometimes we've got guys that they feel very strongly called to ministry, and they just have not been in churches that think that way or are supportive that way, and so it can be difficult to so to have people who can honestly say to you, we affirm that your gifts, that inclination, we think you have potential, to pursue that. So in terms of balance, I just think both need to be there. And in terms of discerning a release from that call, I think I don't think we need to over spiritualize anything. Like, where is the Lord putting you circumstantially? How spiritually, how are you doing spiritually and in your season of life? I don't know if Logan means like a release from the call to ministry generally, or like to a specific ministry, right? When Becky and I believed that our time in Vermont, for instance, was coming to an end, I didn't believe that was the end of me doing ministry, but it was for that specific thing, and that was a subjective thing. There was no divine, voice. There's no audible voice. There was no shaft of light. Or there was no, it was the circumstances, me seeking, wisdom from the Lord, talking with my wife, looking at what would be best for the church. It was a congruence of circumstances that I believed was a sensing of, and there are people who disagree. They're like, no, there's no such thing as that. You're called to a church, you stay there forever until you die, And I'm like, well, I don't see that in the Bible either. But I understand the heart behind that, and some of it is just a concern that this idea of calling becomes this super subjective, whatever I want to do kind of thing. And there's just not a formula for it.
Yep, that's right.
So, Logan, I think discerning a release involves really just sort of an honest and open-eyed consideration of circumstances, how your family's doing, how your wife's doing, the needs of the church. I really was thinking, even though my wife and I were not flourishing, I was also thinking, as our church is growing, because it was, I don't know that I have the tools to lead the church into the next season of growth, especially in a solo pastor model. They need somebody with better leadership skills, and so that was an honest, sort of consideration of like, I don't think I'm the guy for the next season. So it's just using wisdom and prudence to kind of think through some of those things. How can this be misused and misunderstood? I think by over spiritualizing it.
Yeah,
that a call is some kind of shaft of light or something.
Especially
like
that if it's like used as a trump card over any kind of wisdom.
Oh yeah, the calling of God is irrevocable.
Yeah, I often would tell students, again at Cedarville, and even here at Midwestern, you'll have students come into your office and they're like, I think I'm called to do this thing, and or God told me to do this thing, and I'm called to do it. I'm like, well, then get up and get out of here. It was bad for the fisherman that Jonah was with when he was disobeying. So it's like you can't use it as this like trump card.
Right. Yeah. Well, and especially we've seen it. This is kind of a tangent, but I've seen it with guys who have disqualified themselves from ministry, and who use that, like the calling of God is irrevocable, which isn't about ministry calling, by the way. That is a Bible verse, but it's not about calling to ministry. They use that to say like, hey, the calling of God is never lifted, and just that internal desire, the internal call becomes the trump card for any kind of external disqualification. All right, this comes from Anonymous via Facebook. And Anonymous didn't ask to be anonymous, but I'm making him anonymous for reasons that may be apparent. Just trying to protect you, Anonymous. He says, how do you get a dying church to become community-centered disciple makers and teach deacons what it means to be biblical deacons when they don't even care? This church, we're not laughing at you, Anonymous. It's just we are sensing the discouragement, and making fun of it. No, I'm just kidding. This church I pastor is a rural church stuck in their ways, who stay to themselves for the most part. It is a group of folks under 20 people who look, dare I say, spiritually dead when they come to church on Sunday morning. Whew. So Anonymous is in a church that he just feels like is lifeless.
Yeah.
And he wants to move them. He wants to see them grow in grace and become the opposite of all of these things.
Yeah. I feel for this brother or this brother who's anonymous. I'm assuming he's the pastor. A couple of things come to mind. One, I would say all of that is probably true. Pastors typically have a unique seat where they get a vantage point to see the spiritual vitality of their flock.
Yep.
So he's probably not wrong. And yet, I would encourage this brother, those 20 people, as small and stubborn as they are, already have an accuser. And so don't join the accuser in his work. It might be the case that they're stuck in their ways. It might be the case that they look spiritually dead. But I'm sure there's a lot of beauty in those 20 people as well.
Yeah.
Meditate on that. Try to fall in love with those people and pastor them from a place of I deeply love them, as opposed to like these are a problem that I have to deal with. I just think just hearing the question, it sounds like there's so much exhaustion there.
Yeah.
I just want to re-encourage the brother to look for the good and pastor the flock of God that's amongst him, not the one he wishes was amongst him, according to 1 Peter. So anyways, there's that. The second thing is, man, I would say I want to speak out of both sides of my mouth. There might be a time to cut the thing loose, and it could be the case that this church needs to sunset, and there's a way in which you can do that in a God glorifying way, or it could be the case that, hey, maybe with a little more love and a little more time, this church could find life. And I just don't know the circumstances well enough to be able to tell him, maybe it's you, maybe it's not you, maybe you're not the guy to do this, Right. But I would just say follow the ordinary means of grace to bring vitality back to the church. Continue expository preaching, continue prayer, continue breaking bread, continue caring about discipleship and good theology. And if those things aren't bringing the church back to life, those are things that the Spirit often uses to bring churches to life. And if that doesn't work, then maybe there is some spiritual deadness. And the things of the Spirit aren't acting like spiritual things.
Yeah, what I don't know about Anonymous's circumstance, he says, how do you get a dying church to XYZ? Are you a part of an association? A lot of times, like Baptist associations, there are, what do you call it?
Like tools for this.
Well, yeah, the associational directors can come alongside you and can kind of like it, and it's likely that they even know the church or have been around longer and can speak into that. But they can provide resources, whether it's books, training, outside consultant. I mean, there's our friend and frequent Midwestern Seminary professor John Mark Clifton. He's involved with the revitalization and replanting efforts and that sort of thing, and just has a knack for this, for seeing the Lord breathe new life into these things. So there are resources, there's equipping out there, but how do you get any church to grow in grace from either borderline dead to big but not lively to whatever stage of growth?
Yeah,
it's communicating the gospel, sharing grace, and being what you want to see. Can you model this kind of evangelistic fervor? Can you model community-centered disciple making? Is even on a small scale, what can you do to show them by example? I don't think that loving a church and communicating grace to a church, preaching the gospel, precludes at a member meeting or something having a kind of come to Jesus, honesty. Hey, church, like, we're under 20. These are the things that we're seeing. This is the state of our ministry. This church is going to die in a few years if we do not. I think any church needs to hear that honestly from their pastor. So if there's something that's keeping you from speaking plainly to these folks about the state of ministry and how you perceive that as their shepherd, I think you should be free to do that. I just wouldn't let that become the tenor of your ministry, that you're just constantly, burdening them with what they're not and what they're not doing.
That's right.
Because the way to get them out of how they are is to show them a difference and to give Jesus to them, proclaim Jesus to them. And it could be that this is what you need in this season of life for yourself, to learn about the grace of God in difficult and hard seasons.
Yeah. Just a reminder, though, to anyone, this brother and anyone listening, if you get to pastor a church of 20 people that are stubborn and stuck in their ways and that causes you frustration, that is still infinitely more than you deserve.
Sure.
And so just keep that in mind.
Yeah. Good. All right. Finally, this comes from Mark via Facebook. Mark says, when preaching longer series, gospel or Romans, how often, if at all, should pastors take breaks from the series to give their people something different? A summer in the Psalms, a 4-week mini-series through something? Is there wisdom in taking periodic breaks? Yeah, of course there's wisdom in taking periodic breaks.
When did summer in the Psalms become a thing?
I don't know. We do a month.
That trend is everywhere right now.
But we're doing, in fact, this July, we're going to be in the Psalms. And we've done that a month here or there over the last 2 or 3 years as well. We've done it in the winter as well, January in the Psalms.
Well, that doesn't work. You can only do the Psalms in the summer.
You mean the summer?
Yeah, I don't understand. Winter Psalms? Yeah, right. Yeah. No, I think you're right. Yeah, there's wisdom in it. I would say I have found preaching longer series, like I think the longest series Emmaus has ever, well, I don't know. We've done, I mean, this brother listed New Testament. I mean, preached through Jeremiah.
Right.
And we've done a prophet series. We did a John series that was very long. We did an Acts series that was very long. And I would say from doing that, there are congregants, and I've even seen this in myself and in preachers that I was sharing the pulpit with. Some of us are most blessed by a worm's eye view of the text, where you're crawling syllable by syllable and taking a nibble each time, and you just want to be in one verse for a week, and then we'll do the next verse the next week. Some congregants love bird's eye view of the text, and they don't want to go experience each tree. They want to zoom up and see what the shape of the forest is and where the boundaries of the forest really are. And so I would just say, think about both of those people. You can't do all of that every sermon, but if you're doing a series like Romans, for example, and you're doing some brothers take 2 years in the book of Romans. I'm like, wait, what? It's only 16 chapters. How are you doing that many weeks in the book of Romans? You're doing very worm's eye view. I tend to be a bird's eye view. I like the big picture of stuff. In fact, I want to know the parameters of like the book of Galatians. Like, what's the whole structure before I work through each individual verse? And having that rhythm being in tune to those two kinds of views of the text will actually typically give way to where would it be wise to place a little 4-week series or something, you know? Because if you're at a spot where it's like, yeah, you probably don't want to do a 4-week break when you're in John 20. Like, no, get to the resurrection part, you know, like don't break there, you know. But yeah, the book will give way to like, okay, it's probably wise here, or it's not wise here.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're just trying to strike a balance between too often breakings where you're not giving people a sustained look, you know, at the book that you're journeying through together, or, you know, that you're breaking, you know, not enough.
Yes.
And so, you know, I can tell you what we do, and I don't know if this is, you know, Mark, helpful to you, but we typically take month-long breaks maybe 3 times a year, sometimes 4 times a year. So in September, I usually have some kind of topical series. Each of those messages is on a text, but we do, you know, like this. We're planning for this September to do kind of a manhood, womanhood series. Last year, I did a series that was just called Tough Texts, where every Sunday was sort of a different, difficult, you know, passage of Scripture. We usually do an Advent series, so you're looking at either the very end of November or certainly through December, Advent. Often in the summer, we'll do a July Psalms or July something. And then sometimes in January, we'll start the year with a topical series or a shorter book. So it's not always topical. Sometimes we're like, hey, let's do, you know, 4 weeks and let's knock out, you know, Malachi or something like that. And we just move to a different book. So I think it's smart. You know, you don't have to do this, you know, the same way that we do it. It gives people a little bit of a breather. It helps them kind of develop you know, or renewed interest in the book that you've been going through. If they feel congregationally that there's a staleness, or it's getting, you know, okay, we've been in this book for a while. Hey, take a 4-week break, come back. You have kind of a renewed interest in it, and you're seeing it with fresh eyes again. And I think that can be smart to do, but I don't think there's, you know, any rules or laws about it. No. You know, if you want to do every single week, 52 weeks a year through Romans or whatever, hey, do that. That's what's best for your church. You know, it's the preaching of the word that changes people. Yep. So yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about it. That's it for the mailbag.
Great questions.
Yeah, some good questions. If you have questions for the mailbag or topics you'd like to hear us cover, please message us at mailbag@ftc.co, mailbag@ftc.co. And if you enjoy the podcast, please give us a good review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to or watch your favorite podcasts. And until next time, may Jesus be big in your church.